we have Elizabeth Lawrence. Elizabeth, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said after the meeting that it was important that this meeting took place because it will dispel doubts, manage differences, expand cooperation. What do you think was accomplished?
Well, I think a lot was accomplished. Certainly, as your other speakers have said, the military channels of communication are extremely important. Those had been, of course, suspended for over a year. And then, of course, the fentanyl ingredients, limiting, those, and then also an agreement on the environment is extremely important. What we saw, of course, is a very warm welcome from the U.S. business community. U.S. trade, with two-way trade, I should say, with China is at a record high, as is U.S. foreign direct investment in China. And so there is still a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for U.S. trade and investment with China. Politically, it's a little bit more uneven. But as far as economics goes, I think that we can look forward to continued robust economic relations.
On the three concrete issues in which there was agreement, Elizabeth, we talked about them a moment ago. There was the climate change. Both sides have agreed to push the agenda forward with even more vigor right now. The military-to-military communications, those lines being opened right now between Washington and Beijing, and also progress being made on narcotics. What did you make of those agreements?
Well, they were much anticipated. Back in 2019, Xi Jinping had made some agreements with President Trump regarding, limit the precursor ingredients. And we didn't see a lot of progress there. And so going forward, the U.S. is going to want to see, some progress there. Again, military to military channels of communication are extremely important as there are tensions, across the Taiwan Strait, as also in the South China Sea. That is, as you know, a very large area of disagreement between the United States and China. And we need to be able to talk to avoid accidents and misunderstandings. The environment, China and the U.S. and the rest of the world has been talking about the environment for a very long time. There's been really, honestly, very limited progress. That's an area where the countries need to kick it into high gear. But, a lot of people are very skeptical about having to pay more high energy costs that come along with the transitions, to a green economy. And so there's pros and cons to that as well.
Right, and specifically on the business issues, this summit that took place here in San Francisco, it was a culmination of months of high-level diplomatic contacts between Washington and Beijing. We saw a string of cabinet officials make their way to Beijing for talks with Chinese officials, including the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. The Treasury Secretary went as well. The Trade Secretary was there as well. Then we had Wang Yi, the Chinese Foreign Minister, who came to Washington. That was just a few weeks ago. But we still hear those terms like decoupling, de-risking. Do you think those kinds of threats are now receding, or do they still remain a problem?
I think that the United States and China has come to a fork in the road regarding both economics and politics. At the U.S. side, a lot of people are still talking about decoupling or de-risking. There's this concept called China Plus One, and that to de-risk, companies will not only secure their supply chains in China, but also in other countries, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam, perhaps, here in the Western Hemisphere in Mexico. And so there's that going on. But on the other hand, as I said, U.S. and China trade is at record high, $690 billion two-way trade in 2020. And then U.S. FDI in China reached $125 billion last year, again, record high. Now, talk about that fork in the road. But what we're seeing is Chinese FDI in the United States has dropped to the lowest since 2009. And that is partly because of increased scrutiny of Chinese investment in the United States. But politically, there's a fork as well. As you know, in American politics, there are the hawks, and there are some hawks in the Biden administration, as well as amongst Republicans and Democrats, who are critical of China, particularly its geopolitical aspirations. But on the other hand, there is the American businesses who would really like to continue to particularly cooperate with China in the area of technology. And so the hawks are saying, you know, we need to impose export controls on sensitive technology, but business is saying, hey, wait a minute, please lift those controls, because if we're going to make significant advances in technology, we need to cooperate with China.
You know, talking about technology, there was also a sharp focus here on AI, artificial intelligence, especially its military applications. I mean, this is the defining technology of our age. There wasn't any kind of agreement or anything like that, but something that the both sides were, I guess, in agreement with was that they would reopen dialogue on this particular kind of technology. How important is that?
Extremely important. Of course, the United States, the Biden administration has said that it did not want to transfer technology to China that be used by its military. And, you know, a lot of so-called dual use technology can be used both for civilian, consumer purposes as well as military. So the highly sensitive stuff, the United States, on national security grounds, does not want transferred to China. So again, we get back to that fork or that division in American politics, that there are those who are saying national security interests come first. Others, you know, more like the business community, a lot of, you know, people in high tech are saying, but we can't shut ourselves off from China. You know, China has absolutely fabulous, you know, technicians and scientists who come to the United States, and we share information. We work on projects together all the time. And so if we cut out the Chinese, we're cutting out a lot of talent there. So, you know, it's, of course, for China, you know, China would very much like to have U.S. technology because it advances Chinese technology, which says, you know, benefits everyone around.
Okay, Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us and for your insight.